Hey everyone, welcome back to the Woodland Reboot. Time to get on with building a desk for the great room down at the house. So what do I have in mind? I want to make an epoxy desk. I've already built the form for it. So this form is about 20 inches wide, 7 feet long. This is all caulked. You can see it in there, screwed together. See there, and about every foot you've got a screw underneath holding the sides together. So I don't expect any leaks on that. And then over here, here's the wood. This is ash. You can see the marks there from the emerald ash borer. 7 feet long. They're about 6 inches wide. And in fact, if I can put my hands on my tape measure over here, let's have a look. I think it's actually more, that's 7 inches there, a little bit fatter as you go down that board, and a little bit over 7 there. 7 feet long, averaging 7 inches wide, and the gap that's going to be filled with the epoxy in between is anywhere from 5 to 6 inches, roughly all the way down. I need about 3 gallons of epoxy to fill it. So that's the plan. And then over here, you'll see this additional little mold set up with a couple of red oak pieces, something that could be turned into a charcuterie board. I've got that set aside in case I've misjudged, and hopefully, worst case scenario or best case scenario, I'll have some additional or leftover epoxy. I don't want to be short, but I hope that I've possibly overcalculated, and I'll use the excess on that little side project over there. Like many ash trees in North America, you can see the damage left behind by the borer, emerald ash borer. Unfortunate, they leave behind these galleries, S-shaped galleries, and it leads to the death of the tree over time. Very, very unfortunate. Anyways, as you can see, I have cleaned up the edges using my sander. That's ready to go. And what I'm going to do, I've put one in here already. As you can see the hole. I'm going to make several holes, maybe 5 on each piece of lumber, just to give, maybe half an inch deep, just to give the epoxy a little bit more purchase in the process of drying and solidifying. Instead of just hanging on the edge, it's also going to have those holes to pour into and to solidify. Let me get on with drilling the rest of those and then getting the pieces of wood into that mold. I have the 2 pieces of lumber over here on top of my thickness planer for the time being. These, by the way, are 1 5/8 inches thick. I've got the mold on top of the mobile workbench. It's level. Got the blocks for holding it down, clamps on the table, and various pieces of wood. Let's head over here and have a look at the laboratory section of this project. I've been using the product from a company called Magic Resin for the projects that I do. This is a 3-gallon kit. I've calculated that I need about 3.1 gallons, and I've got a couple of leftover jugs here of part A and part B from some previous projects. So I definitely have enough for that big project. Not sure there's going to be enough left over for this little project that I told you about earlier. If not, we'll get some other epoxy for that one. But just in case I have some extra, it'll go in there if I think it's enough. I have my paddle, 5-gallon, 19-liter jug. We're going to pour all of that in. Of course, not all of this. I have to make some measurements with this, but this whole kit goes in, and then we're going to stir it up. This is the color pigment I'm going to use for this project. So a nice, I think it's called Maui. So that's going to add a nice color, make the wood pop. The ash is a very blonde hardwood, So that blue is going to make that pop nicely. Before I start mixing the epoxy, I'd like to get the boards into the mold. Epoxy mold release. So spray the inside, and it should help with the release later on when it's all dried and hardened. So the front edge is going to be a live edge. And again, this is for a desk area inside the house. Cleaned off the pieces of wood as well. They're ready to go in, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is secure the pieces of wood, and I'm also going to epoxy the bottom edge to do my darndest so that we keep the epoxy inside where we want it and it doesn't flow into the gaps or down the sides. So let's take care of that. Let's get the blocks in place. And I think 2 points to hold them down is sufficient. We're going to changed out the clamps on this end. These little quick grip ones just weren't strong enough. Got these steel ones in place here. A little crooked. I might adjust that one to fix that. But now what I'm going to do is caulk the inside edges here, so hopefully no epoxy gets out. Keep this, hopefully this front edge, this live edge, clean of the epoxy, because that'll be very difficult to get off if it gets in there. Caulk up these corners here as well, so I'll get busy with that. I'm going to leave it like that for now. I've got the epoxy in there like I described. I didn't take a video of that. I'll show it to you once it's cured. I put a cover on it to keep the dust off it if there is any in here or while I'm working away doing some other things. So it's breathing around the sides, but covered. So we're going to leave it like that. We're going to catch up with this once that caulking is dried and we can get ready to pour the epoxy. If you're going to try this, you want to make sure you've got some gloves, that your clothing's covering all your skin, and that you've got some eye protection. You just don't want to play around with this stuff. Okay, let's put this down here. See if you guys can get a look at that. I really want to try to get these things to drain out. It's very viscous. It's a very viscous material, so it can take a few minutes to drip out from the inside of the plastic container. So that's the hardener. No, sorry, that's part A. 2 part A's, 1 part B. Anyways, you guys get the idea. What I'll do is I will catch up with you once I'm ready to start stirring. I'm going to say that's about 3.2, 3.3 gallons. And now I'm going to hit it with the paddle. I haven't put the dye in yet. I'm just going to mix up what's in the bucket right now before I put the dye in. Right now, a lot of bubbles in there. We're going to address that later once we've made the pour. This is a very big pour, over 3 gallons. The pour itself is about 1 3/4 inches deep. I've got a metallic color pigment here. If you guys can see that. And it's called Maui, so it's a very bright blue with flecks and crystals in it. I think I'm going to need a little bit of this in here to bring out the blue the way I want it. I'm going to add that much for now. You can see I'm using a wooden tongue depressor. And we're going to hit it with the paddle again. Let's see how this starts to take. add some more. So like I said, I'd like this to be really blue and dramatic. I mean, I think that should do it. Try to clean that paddle off best you can, and then have a place where you can set it down where it can essentially drip dry. Okay, let's let that settle before we add some more. I'll get to those bubbles in a minute. I've got this inclusion area here that's got some cracks in it, so I'm trying to get as much epoxy in there as I can, but it's bleeding through. I can't remember if that goes all the way through. I don't think it did. So this is looking quite good. I need to address the bubbles. We'll get to that. I might pour in a tiny bit more of the epoxy. I ran out of caulking and I didn't get this section right here done. So I still think I might bring it up a bit. I see no epoxy getting in behind here, so this is working. You know, the caulking that I did seems to be working. So far so good, and no leaks on the outside of the form. There's a lot of caulking that went into making this form. So I'd like to think I'm safe, but we're going to continue to watch that for the next half hour to see if anything bleeds out. But it all looks quite good. That's how much epoxy is left. So not nearly enough needed to do that other form over there. You make those just as backup, just in case. And I was pretty close with the amount of epoxy required here. I'm going to put a little bit more in and do some touch-ups around that inclusion. And then I'm going to get to removing the bubbles. A lot of the bubbles have disappeared on their own over the last 3 to 5 minutes, but we're going to hit it with some flame here and take care of the rest of the bubbles that are in there. We'll watch that over the next half hour and see if some more bubbles come to the surface. We'll address them as they come up. I like the way this has turned out. The caulking is prevented so far any bleeding out around the backside underneath, and especially along this live edge front over here. It's come up nicely against the caulking. this table and this floor, they're quite level, so you're getting even spread and leakage pretty much up and down. So I'm pleased. I'm pleased with the way this has turned out so far. I'm going to watch it for another half hour to make sure there's no leaks in the mold. And I think that this is going to turn out quite well, this blonde wood and that very nice bright blue with the Maui tint in the epoxy. I'm really pleased with this. The crack inclusion here is filled up nicely with epoxy. It's not draining out anymore. Got a little bit of an overflow right there. I might try to stop that. Otherwise, I'll be covering this in about half an hour and just let it cure for a few days. All right. 4 clamps are off. Let me get this stuff put away. I'll be right back. Because of the leakage, we've got one block here that's got some epoxy, and it's epoxied itself to the top. It's one of the reasons why we wrap these in the tuck tape. It should release with a little bit of a whack. There you go. No problem whatsoever. That'll get cleaned up in the planing process. You guys get the idea. I'll check up with you guys once I've got all those screws out. All of the screws are out, and really that's about the only thing that's going to be salvageable from the mold building process. Maybe this larger bottom piece could be cut up and used for smaller pieces in other molds, but these side ones, they're going to get wrecked, as you see as we take this apart. That's loose. See how well the epoxy got in there? Sorry, not the epoxy, the caulking got in there and just sealed up that joint perfectly. You want that when you're doing these molds, otherwise you're going to get leakage and you're going to be a sad person at the end of the day. Did I forget some screws? Definitely forgot one there. Man, they just don't release sometimes. There we go. Now, the next piece of the challenge is to see how well the mold release works in removing it from that bottom piece. All right, let's see. Let's see how this... Oh, wow. That's perfect. No problem at all there. I'm very interested. Is there a little bit of a warp in this? Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of a warp up in this corner here. A little warp, nothing major. That'll all get cleared up in the thickness planing process. I'm going to get this turned over and see what the bottom looks like. Big piece of bread coming out of the oven. All right, let's get this out of the way. Put it behind. So the live edge has turned out really well. Again, you can see that damage from the boring insect, but partially smooth right now already. And none of the epoxy seeped under and came up, so that's great. Nothing to clean up there. It's really hard to clean up if that gets through. Really pleased with that. Now time to flip this over. Actually, before we flip it over, let's have a good look at the top here. The epoxy pour turned out very well. Again, you put on these additional caulking dams when you see that there's some overflow. That captures and just keeps it contained so it's not spread everywhere. Here we had a crack and an inclusion, so that's where I wanted some of the epoxy to drift into and soak into. That's gone extremely well. That's going to be all sealed up and tight. Another little inclusion here that's covered. Bubbles that came up afterwards, hopefully that all comes out. Yeah, that's turned out quite well. It's nearly 1.75 inches thick, so I'd like to think I'm not going to lose any more than 1/4 inch in the thickness planing process, maybe less. So I hopefully have about 1.5 inches or just shy of 1.5 inches once that's done. All right, here we go. And if you don't have a workbench like this, either buy one or make one, because as you can see, you can roll it around. It's quite invaluable. Try not to bang the fingers. So that's what the bottom looks like. Now remember that this has been poured and it was on that white laminate board, so it's taken the surface and made those impressions. There was a little seepage here, but did not come all the way over, so very thankful for that. That's the back end, that's the back edge there. So again, this caulking that I put in here with silicone has worked out really well. That'll all come off in the thickness planing exercise. I own this thickness planer right here, this DeWalt. The unfortunate thing about that, very good machine, it's only 15, I believe it's 15 inches wide. This piece over here, how wide is this piece? I'm going to say 21. This piece here is about 19 inches. Yep. The widest part right there, 19.25, where you've got the live edge point there. So what I do with these larger pieces is that I take that over to a shop that has a wide thickness planing or router machine set up where they can clean it up, make it flat, and then I go pick it up and bring it back out here and start the sanding and buffing process. I loaded the slab in the back of the Tesla, and Blue and I headed off down the road, and we delivered it to the shop, to the business that does the thickness planing for me. We picked it up. It's now ready. I don't know if you can see how dull it is there in the back with Blue. Back at the shop here, and as you can see, the shine has really come off of the epoxy due to the thickness planing process. You also see a couple of black dots in several places as we go back and forth here. That's Starbond glue that I've used to fill in some voids. In the next video, we're going to do the sanding, the wet sanding, the buffing, fitting the legs, and installing the tabletop desk, whatever you want to call it. Hope you drop in. Enjoy the sunrise and sunset shots. See you soon.